In this video, we'll look at the shape of a distribution. Measures of center like mode, median, and mean are useful ways of relating some information about our data, but sometimes just that single number on its own doesn't really tell us enough. We can convey a little more information by talking about how the rest of the values are distributed around that center, that is, the shape of the distribution, perhaps from visualizing it with a histogram, a dot plot, or stem plot. For example, we might notice that the data has a single peak, which is a mode, so we call the data unimodal. But in other situations, we might notice that there are two peaks, which we'd then call a bimodal distribution. Or maybe there are no peaks at all and the whole thing is just flat. That's what we call a uniform distribution. We also might look at the symmetry of the distribution. If the left half looks the same as the right half, we call the distribution symmetric. At this point, I should probably mention it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetric. It can be a little off, and we'd still call it roughly symmetric. But other times, the distribution is drastically asymmetric. For example, if the peak or mode is to the left, but the data extends much further to the right of the peak, we say that the data is skewed to the right, because its long right tail pulls the mean further to the right. On the other hand, if the peak is to the right and the data extends much further to the left of the peak, we say the data is skewed to the left, because its long left tail pulls the mean to the left. When it comes to skew, it's easy to get confused about which is which if you're not careful. So just remember, when we talk about the skew, we're talking about where the longer tail is. A longer left tail means the data is skewed left, and a longer right tail means the data is skewed right. Each of these shapes tells us something about how our data is distributed. How many of the values are low, medium, or high? Try to think of some real-world examples of situations where you might see data whose distributions take on these kinds of shapes.